It was about 11 o'clock in the morning, mid-October, when I began making my PowerPoint presentation. I was neat, clean-shaven, sober, and I didn't care who knew it. I was everything a poor, struggling student ought to be. I was going to make a presentation on hard-boiled crime if it was the last thing I did. Hey everyone, my name is Melanie, and if you hadn't guessed it already, this is Hardboiled Crime. Excuse my throat because I've got a really bad cold, so I might sound a bit funny. So, when I first started learning about hardboiled crime, I had a real blonde moment and I was expecting something about hard-boiled eggs to pop up. So, just to clarify, if you're looking for hard-boiled eggs, you have got the wrong PowerPoint. But just as an excellent favour to you, here's a picture of some eggs. Okay, but seriously, no more yoking around here. When I'm talking about hard-boiled crime, I'm talking about hard-boiled detective fiction, which features the masculine figure of the private eye. On this PowerPoint, I will be discussing the private eye and concepts of white masculinity in The Big Sleep and The Monkey's Mask. The reading I'm focusing on for this discussion is The Street Was Mine, White Masculinity in Hard-Boiled Crime and Film Noir by Megan Abbott. I will also be referencing other texts which I believe demonstrate the conventions of crime fiction. When we are talking about hard-boiled private eyes, we aren't talking about golden age detectives like Agatha Christie's Poirot or Miss Marple. These detectives tend to be based in Britain and be book-type intellectuals such as Sherlock Holmes. You won't find a hard-boiled detective saying, "Elementary, my dear Watson." No, the types of detectives that we are talking about are grungy white men who wear suits, need to shave and drink too much. In modern and popular culture, we see many examples of this kind of character. For example, Bob Hoskins' portrayal of Eddie Valiant in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I couldn't not have a quick look at film noir here because the particular chapter is also referring to film noir. Eddie Valiant is a good character for introducing the conventions of hard-boiled crime. However, it's probably important to keep in mind that this film is a comedy and therefore parodies a lot of the hard-boiled conventions. In the link below, the filmmakers thought it would be funny to add a guy eating a hard-boiled egg. Ha ha ha. Please click the link below to view. However, before we start looking at masculinity in crime, we need to have a little look at femininity in contrast. Who Framed Roger Rabbit also gives a very iconic interpretation of the femme fatale character, which is Jessica Rabbit. She displays all of the femme fatale's characteristics, which include being good-looking, mysterious, and at one point being a prime suspect in a crime, as well as the implication of her being romantically interlinked with the private eye. It seems that a lot of crime texts are a bit old-fashioned, of an old-fashioned male perspective, and therefore the women are objectified. And of course this happens more obviously so in film noir. While the male figure, according to Abbott, has changed from the 1930s through to the 1950s, it seems that women remain timelessly sexy, elusive, and therefore dangerous. Speaking of timeless, Jessica Rabbit was said to have been modelled on Marilyn Monroe's cameo performance in the Marx Brothers film Love Happy, although Monroe's most famous femme fatale role was as Rosie in the 1953 film Niagara. Please click on the links below to view these in relation to the femme fatale figure. And of course, in the texts we have been studying this semester, Carmen Sternwood in The Big Sleep is a prime example of the femme fatale figure. Her flirtatious innocence becoming dangerous as Detective Marlowe discovers more and more about what she has been involved with. And of course, her involvement in the pornography scandal emphasises the objectification of the femme fatale. Abbott discusses the reason for the femme fatale's existence, particularly in relation to Chandler's text, which she says the hard-boiled figure is no less ambiguous and threatening than the femme fatales he confronts. And she questions, if white men do not assume their appropriate positions of power, then who will? Of course, Carmen Sternwood is threatening by her sexuality, whereas Marlowe is dangerous by attitude and profession. And I guess with such blatant displays of seduction and femininity from these femme fatale characters, it is inevitable that the lead character, the private eye, will be extremely masculine in nature. This kind of private eye, according to Abbott, is a solitary white man, hard-bitten, street-savvy, but very much alone amid the chaotic din of the modern city. Generally lower class or middle working class, heterosexual, and without family or close ties, he navigates his way through urban space, figured as threatening or corrupt. Now, let's have a look at through the characteristics of both Philip Marlowe and Jill Fitzpatrick in relation to Abbott's chapter. Both characters are white, or otherwise not implied otherwise, so the assumption is made that they are white. They are not both male, however Jill has some very strong male characteristics about her. When I first started reading The Monkey's Mask, I got really confused because everything Jill was describing about herself made her sound like a man, and of course my own assumption was that the PI would be male, and this was subverted by this character. She describes herself as muscular and having gorilla hands, and of course her relationship with Diana I assumed to be heterosexual until I learned they were both women. Both detectives are from different cultures and eras. According to Abbott, American construction of masculinity and femininity is linked fundamentally to race ideology, which helps naturalize the separation of genders and race. It seems that Abbott believes that there is something fundamental for the forward drive of the plot of crime and film noir, is that the white male must hold power over something else along the way, or someone else along the way. Excuse me. Perhaps she is implying that if the PI is not powerful, then it makes no sense in the narrative for them to be strong enough to solve the case. I think Jill being Australian makes a huge impact on the reading culturally, because it shows the same kind of lone dog in the city characteristics as The Big Sleep, only in a bush setting. The mountains are her hideaway, and the bush, rather than a dumpster or an abandoned house, is where Mickey's body is discovered. There is something innate in our culture too which makes Jill a character you want to succeed, the old sort of sticking up for the underdog type idea, especially when she is considered to be part of a minority group by being a lesbian. Both of the PIs being lower class actually suits the plot well, because money is a motivation for the good guys as well as the bad. If they were high class or rich already, there wouldn't be any point in them being detectives, because if money wasn't their motivation, it would be solely a personal matter, which both cases it becomes anyway. The section I have added, which is to do with minority groups, is interesting to observe in relation to these two texts because they culturally will have different minority groups which they will have power over. In terms of historical context of The Big Sleep, racism would have been prevalent, so here I have added the character Joe Brody as a possible victim of this. Now, when I first read The Big Sleep, I thought that Brody was African American, just because of some of the character descriptions of him describing him with brown hands and having a brown poker face, and he also calls Marlowe brother, which is African American slang. But I'm unsure if this is the case, because Chandler's character descriptions up until the introduction of Brody are pretty blunt, so I'm not sure why he would tiptoe around him saying he was African American. And in the movie, I think it was portrayed by a white man, so that confused me further. And look, I could be completely wrong, but for the case of this reading, and looking at racial minorities, I'll just leave it as this for now. It is interesting that despite being part of a minority group in some shape or form, they also have power over other groups, like Jill determining the fate of Mickey's case, despite her employers being of a higher class in society than her. Somehow in The Monkey's Mask it seems like everyone is brought down to the same level at some point. In the film version of The Big Sleep, Marlowe has a relationship with Vivian Sternwood just to stir up the plot, but there is nothing in the book which strongly indicates this is the case to me. In The Monkey's Mask, however, it is all about sex, pretty much everything, and Jill's relationship with Diana emphasises the danger of the femme fatale. I've also included Nick as a femme fatale figure, because despite being male, he exhibits feminine characteristics, to the point where Jill almost sleeps with him. This shows once again the subversion of hardboiled crime and masculinity in this text, which is a very modern reflection on what makes a man and what makes a woman. In this case, gender is very ambiguous and almost lost in Porter's poems, and it isn't nearly as much of an issue as it is in The Big Sleep, or a stereotype as it is in The Big Sleep. The xenophobic world of the 30s and 50s, as described by Abbott, is pretty much non-existent in The Monkey's Mask because so many things are fluid and transparent. Abbott raises concerns on page 5 of the introduction about anxiety of masculinity surrounding World War II and post-war societies, where women suddenly have more rights than they previously had. And of course this is evident in The Big Sleep, but in The Monkey's Mask, it seems that the anxieties of this culture come from the idea of no gender roles, perhaps too much freedom and ridicule of those genders. From Jill's pondering of when Diana said that she call, which is viewed to be a female anxiety, to the lovey-dovey poems of Mickey. It is all ridicule for being too feminine or too something by Jill and the other characters. But then in turn, where is femininity if a masculine woman is critiqued for being too feminine? This text really looks at the rights between man and woman, right or wrong, sex or murder, and where the line is, or perhaps if there even is a line now that modern society is so extremely fluid. Perhaps Porter is suggesting that we need the gender construct of the traditional hard-boiled crime novels in order to keep some inkling of where we are and who we are, and this idea would seem to agree with Abbott's ideas of masculinity reigning supreme, just to give some form of structure in a society. Thank you for watching my presentation on hardboiled crime. To reward you for sitting through all my talking and coughing, here's a picture of an investigator.